Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Gridiron Lines. Your host Gary McKenzie here is wanting to talk to you about duds. No, not milk duds. I know that many of you recently just got over Halloween or got through Halloween. Personally, I love Halloween. But we're not talking milk duds. We're talking Chiefs duds, particularly Mahomes duds. And what has happened to the Chiefs after they've had a dud of a game, similar to like what they had last weekend versus the Denver Broncos, where they laid a boulder-sized egg in the middle of Mile High Stadium for the whole world to see. And man, it was pathetic. Twitter blew up. Everyone hated the Chiefs on that day. The wide receivers were the worst that they'd ever seen in their entire lives. And everyone was very angry. Very angry. Wanting to blow up the entire wide receiver room. And many unmentionable things were said about Sky Moore. So, after all of that instant reaction, I took some notes, some wonderful notes here. And this is actually an assignment that one of my students turned in for my classes I teach at MU. But after I'm done grading, it turns into scratch paper for these wonderful RGR videos. And I want to talk about Chiefs games in the Mahomes era where they've laid an egg, they've had a dud, and then what happened before and after. I'm doing this because right now, Chiefs fans are saying, this wide receiver group can't get it done. This is terrible. This group is not going anywhere. And I assure you, those same exact things were said about different areas of the Chiefs' offense or defense in prior games where the Chiefs laid an egg. So in 2018, the Chiefs actually, with Mahomes at quarterback, never had a dud game. So no evidence in 2018 to talk about. They lost 5 games that year, 4 of them during the regular season, and then the AFC Championship game versus New England. In each of those 5 losses, they scored at least 28 points. In fact, that was the year they had a 40-point loss at New England during the regular season. They had a 51-point loss versus the Rams in one of the most insane football games I've ever seen in my entire life. Holy cow. And their lowest point total was when they lost to the Chargers, but they scored 28 that game. So there were no dud-like games from the offense. And how spoiled were we in 2018 to see the eruption of the Chiefs' offense? And that was probably my favorite year of Chiefs football. Even though they didn't win the Super Bowl, I always look back on that year with such fondness because it was the year that Mahomes came onto the scene, and we knew in Kansas City that they had a legit quarterback, and from the looks of it, one of the best quarterbacks perhaps to ever grace the field. So it's like the start of a good movie. You always like the start of a good movie, and that's what 2018 felt like to me. In 2019, however, they did have a dud. So if you remember, Week 5, 2019, they lost to the Indianapolis Colts in Kansas City. They had no Tyreek Hill, no Sammy Watkins in that game. The offense only mustered 13 points, and they looked entirely anemic throughout the entire game. Byron Pringle tried his best to play some hero ball. He had 103 yards receiving in that game, but the Chiefs could not do much at all in that game on offense, even though they had Mahomes at quarterback. Before that game, the Chiefs had played 4 regular season games. They averaged 33.8 points. After that game, the Chiefs played 14 games, including the postseason, regular season. They averaged 30 points. So 4 games, small sample size, 33.8 points. 14 games, larger sample size, 30 points. The Chiefs also went on to win the Super Bowl that year. And so while you could identify the fact that, the Chiefs were going to have their wide receivers back, they still laid an egg in Week 5. And they went on to have a very good offensive year. They went on to win the Super Bowl. The next week, even then, when they had Tyreek Hill back, they lost to Houston. They lost to a good Texans team, led by the quarterback who shall not be named. Moving on to 2020, they really only had one dud game, and that was in the Super Bowl. So they made it all the way to the Super Bowl that year, lost to Tampa Bay on the first ever road Super Bowl game, and that was known as the no offensive line game, where Mahomes was running for his life all over the field, and they only mustered 9 points. But the Chiefs followed up with a good year in 2021. So in 2021, they had the most Dudley of Dudleyest games of all time in Chiefs history, perhaps. And that was whenever they lost to the Tennessee Titans in Week 7 by a score of 3-27. The Chiefs starters were available. They were healthy in that game. It was just a horrible game. It was terrible. And we're sitting here saying that Patrick Mahomes with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill were held to 3 points in Week 7, and alarm bells were ringing for many Chiefs fans. But what did they do? So leading up to that Week 7 loss, where they only scored 3 points, they were averaging 30.8 points per game in 6 games before, leading up to that game in Tennessee. Following that, they played 13 games in the regular season and in the playoffs, and they averaged 30.8 points per game again. Their points per game average was the same before and after their dud game. Eventually, they would go on and lose the AFC Championship game, but that horrible Tennessee game had no bearing on the future of that team, the future output of that team offensively. It was a dud. It was a dud game. And in that game, Mahomes had a 62.3 rating, and they had a -2 turnover differential. In the Chiefs game versus the Broncos, they turned the ball over 5 times. I think it was either a -4 or a -3 turnover differential. They were moving the ball. They just shot themselves in the foot. It was a bad game. Following the next season in 2022, in Week 3, the Chiefs played the Colts again, which are one of those franchises that just haunts the Chiefs for some reason. The Lynn Elliott game was versus the Colts. The ridiculous Andrew Luck fumble game was versus the Colts. The Chiefs, for whatever reason, have always had a hard time versus the Colts. And in Week 3, there's no change to that formula because they lost to Indianapolis 17-20. They had all their starters. Mahomes just played a terrible game. He finished that game with the 78.5 rating. And going into that game, the Chiefs had only played 2 opponents prior to that dud versus the Colts. And in those 2 games, they averaged 35.5 points. Very small sample size. In the 17 games that followed, including regular season and postseason, they averaged 29.2 points per game. They eventually won the Super Bowl that year. So while there was a reduction in points per game, the sample size has a lot to do with that. But I want this consistent theme after a dud game to be out there. And the consistent theme has been, even if the Chiefs had a dud game, following for the rest of the year, they still had good offensive output. The same thing is going to happen in 2019. They had a game where they moved the ball and they shot themselves in the foot. I want everyone, watching this video, actually, let me rephrase that. Everyone watching this video understands that sometimes you just have a bad day. And last Sunday versus the Broncos was a bad day. And it happens in life. And it's not so much about, that bad day. It's how you pick yourself back up. And this Chiefs team has picked themselves back up over and over again through the years. They've proven themselves to us to be able to do that. Coach Reid has proven himself to do that. And I know there's a lot of talk about the Chiefs wide receiver room. Everyone wants to talk about it. And if you want my honest to God opinion about what I think the Chiefs need to do at the wide receiver position, I want to say the 7-man rotation experiment should be put to rest. No more trotting 7 different wide receivers out there, seeing who will come out, seeing what cream rises to the top. The cream has already risen. And the cream right now that's at the top is Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, and Marquez valdes-scantling. Those are the 3 receivers that should be getting the majority of your looks. Unless the Chiefs want to start using Kadarius Toney in a role that was similar to what they did last year, I'm excluding him from that mix. There's some reason why they're not putting him in the same positions and same areas on the field as they did last year. He's not running the same routes as he did last year. I don't know why this is. But those should be your 3 guys you roll with most of the time. And I cannot for the life of me understand why Rashee Rice is only getting 3 or 4 targets a game. You need to be throwing that dude the ball. He looks light years ahead of anyone else on the Chiefs receiving core, and he should be a weapon that they target. I've been saying this for the past several weeks. All that said, though, the Chiefs' offense right now is 12th in points per game. They're number 4 in yards. And anytime I see a disparity like this where your points for are much different than your yardage total, there's other things that are happening and other things your team can work on where you can improve your point total. So the Chiefs are moving the ball this year. There's no doubt to that. But what if I told you that only 2 teams in the NFL have fewer turnovers than the Chiefs? The Chiefs are number 30 in the NFL in turnovers offensively. If this team does 2 things for the rest of the season, things are going to change, and they're going to change drastically. And I predict the offenses are going to look a lot better. Number 1, quit turning the dang ball over. This defense that the Chiefs have is a different unit than what Mahomes has ever had through his entire life playing quarterback. This is a dominant defensive group. So Mahomes is learning. While the offense is not as explosive as it once was, more than ever, the Chiefs need a precision attack from Mahomes, and they need him to take care of the ball. He's never had a problem throughout his career taking care of the ball. In fact, usually every year he leads in touchdown to interception ratio. I'm going to put my money on the man that's proven it for 5 years that he can do that. The Chiefs' turnover problems will get better. The second thing is the Chiefs have to improve in the red zone. The Broncos owned the Chiefs in the red zone, and if the Chiefs improve in those 2 areas offensively, then we're singing a completely different song all the way to the Super Bowl. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, the Chiefs are number 2 in points per game allowed, even after that dud versus the Broncos. And they're number 4 in yards allowed. So those 2 stats are in sync with one another. And I think that this defense has what it takes to continue to play well throughout the season. And next week versus the Dolphins will be their biggest test of the year. However, I will say this. I think the Chiefs defense matches up well with what the Dolphins want to do on offense. The Chiefs defense is disciplined. They won't fall for the awkward misdirection moves that the Dolphins like to do all the time. And while I don't think there's a man alive that can cover Tyreek Hill, I think that if there is a group of secondary players who have maybe a better shot than any other team in the NFL, I think it's the Chiefs. So I like the Chiefs in this game. Last week for my picks, it was brutal. I went 0 for 3. Rashee Rice had 56 yards. I predicted he would get 60. So sometimes you lose. I am now 9-8 in my predictions. And in this game, I don't know what the spread is for the Chiefs-Dolphins game. I would assume it's around 2.5 points favored for the Chiefs. And I'm predicting that the Chiefs will win this game. And I'm predicting that they will cover the spread. I could be horribly wrong again, but I have the feeling that last week was a wake-up call of sorts, and this team is going to button up and look a lot better next week versus a very good Dolphins team. And this game is for their number 1 spot in the AFC playoff picture. So it's a big game, and we'll see what happens. I want you to let me know in the comments. Do you think this dud of a game has any role in the rest of the season for the Chiefs? Do you think that this dud of a game is a symbol or a sign of other problems? Is it a symptom of a much deeper disease in the Chiefs' offense? Let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know, you think the Chiefs win this game? Do you think they cover the spread? As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button too. I want to promote it. You know, we're trying to get to 30,000 subscribers. So any extra subscribers we can get, we appreciate all of you for joining RGR Football. And we love what we do here. So that's all I really got for this video. I had a little different tone. I hope it wasn't too abrasive, but that's my opinion. I think the Chiefs had a bad game, and that bad game is going to stay there. It's going to be something that they can look back on and be a turning point for the season. But history has shown us with the Chiefs, especially the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs, just because they have a bad game, it's not the end of the world. They're going to turn it around. They've turned it around every year since. So that's all I got. This is Gary signing out. RGR Football, Gridiron Lines. Let's have a good game in Munich, in Germany. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.